Welcome to Prism, a podcast meant to inform and encourage church leaders. Here we'll cover every area of church life, from assimilation to personal care and everything in between. So regardless of the size, type, or location, Prism will be a guiding light for brighter churches everywhere. And now here's your host, Neal Scoggins.
And thanks for listening to another episode of Prism, the guiding light for churches. I have with me today, my name is Neal Scoggins, I have with me today a person that is an Andy Griffith connoisseur, just like myself, Marcus Brown, who, Mark used to be my team leader, but now he's doing something else. I guess I ran him away when I was on the team. I don't know what happened. Marcus, thank you so much for being here, man. For me, this is a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the invitation, Neal. I'm honored to be able to be here and to just look forward to this conversation today.
Yeah. You're the only person now. I was working with a church, and I guess it was about a year ago, and now I'm still working with that same church. And we were having a conversation about big days. We were saying what a big day was. Right. And I'm going to ask you for a definition of a big day here in a second. But Marcus, give me a little background about, what you've done in the past and, all the escapade, not all of them, but the local church escapades that you have done in the past.
Yeah, all right. Appreciate it, Neal. Well, as far as I joined the convention in 2009, but prior to that, I was pastoring a church over in the Fort Smith area, First Baptist Church, Jenny Lind. I served there for 8 years before joining the convention. Cool. And before that, there were a handful of very gracious churches in my past that let me interim pastor and supply preach and whatnot when I was very green and very young. So
Gotcha.
I look back on those years and just how gracious they were.
That's cool.
But then, I joined the convention in 2009 as a member of the evangelism and at the time church growth team. It's now the evangelism and church health team. And served on that team until 2019, and at that time I was the team leader of that team. Of course, you were on that team, still are.
Yeah.
And then I transitioned to the executive team of the ABSC. So,
yeah. You're from Fort Smith, right? Well, outside of Fort Smith.
Yeah. Going to Fort Smith was going to town for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived born and raised in the community of Mansfield, about 30 minutes.
Yeah, you threw me off with Jenny Lind because I was like, wait a minute, I thought it was in Mansfield, but you grew up in Mansfield.
I did, and
there
so
you go.
Jenny Lind is between Mansfield and Fort Smith.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Big area, and I'm going somewhere with this. Big area, big churches, small area, medium-sized churches, medium-sized area. What was that area like as the churches that you pastored?
Oh, yeah, okay. So the area that I pastored was all south of Fort Smith. Of course, Fort Smith has large churches and, of course, large city there by Arkansas standards. And so south of there is pretty rural. And so my first church I pastored, they let me serve as interim. It was a church of about 20, maybe 25 people. And then coming out of college, got to interim pastor a church for about a year that was actually ran about 200 people on a Sunday. And but now that would have been a larger church in that setting. Yeah. All shapes and sizes.
So the big day now, that I don't know what we're going to call this episode, but right now it's the big day. Okay. But so explain to me what churches, like if you talk to a church about big days, what does that mean? What is that? Give me a definition of what that means for the local church.
Yeah. Okay. So for most local churches, they already have big days built into their year where attendance is higher than it normally is. Okay. And so the one obviously that tops the list is Easter. We think Easter's coming up, and we think about that as naturally a big day where we're just expecting a larger crowd. Everybody celebrates what a big crowd we have on Easter, and we always say if everybody showed up like they do on Easter, our church would be a lot bigger.
That's right.
But the idea behind a big day is, since these are days where attendance is naturally higher than normal, that instead of just being satisfied with that, we really work to maximize that day, to really have some intentionality to it, so that it's something that God can really use and bless, and we see people respond to the Lord in ways maybe they otherwise would not have.
That's kind of cool. So they're built in. So every church, regardless of whether you identify it or not, you have big days.
Yeah.
So Easter would be a big day. when I was younger, early in the ministry, I would go to small town, Grapevine, Arkansas.
Okay.
They would have homecoming. Homecoming was
Sure.
would that be considered a
Absolutely.
big day?
It would.
Give me
Yeah.
some more other big day, where you're expecting in rural and because you've done interim in rural areas and in larger cities as well. So
Right.
give me here's the first question. Is there a difference in some of the big days in rural areas as opposed to larger cities, or can you have a big day that works in a rural area that will work in a larger city?
Yeah, that's a great question, and while I don't necessarily have definitive information on that, I think maybe it's more of almost a cultural issue where
Gotcha.
in some communities, Mother's Day is a day when it seems like everybody leaves town, but in
Yeah.
other communities, it's when everybody comes home.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it's-
glad you said that.
It's a
yeah.
big day. And
Yeah.
so there are others that come to mind. For example, the Sunday before Christmas is historically a pretty big day.
Yeah.
And the Sunday, maybe right before or right after school starts,
Okay.
is could be a big day. Certainly the one right after school starts, everybody's getting in a routine.
Right.
And a church can have an intentional Bring a Friend Sunday, which could be a big Sunday, or if they're having a revival, the Sunday of revival may be a big Sunday. Things along those lines. Just as your church looks at your calendar throughout the year, what are those big days?
Yeah. So here's the kind of deeper question. So you have those big days. What's the benefit of having those big days other than, hey, we got a large attendance for the local church? What's the benefit for the local church?
Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to, and I remember pastoring, I would look at those big days, and I didn't ever really think in terms of, hey, we got to put forth more effort for this day, because in my mind it was already going to be a great day.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think we just need to work harder and do more and invest in it more. I just wanted to make sure it was good as it was.
Yeah.
But now, and there are some elements we can talk about what makes a big day a big day. But from a pastor's perspective, as you're looking at the significance of a big day, there are several things that come to mind. One is, this is a day unchurched people are more likely to attend than they are other days. For example, I mean, it's natural, for people, even today, even in a culture where maybe people aren't as connected as they used to be. There are going to be more people in church on Easter Sunday than any other time.
That's right. Even now, even in
now.
I hate to use the word post-Christian, but even in the environment that we're in now, people are talking about Easter now that are not even going to church.
Yeah, they are. And so that's a day when a church member can have a conversation with a neighbor or a friend and say, hey, would you consider coming with me on Easter or on another one of these big days? And it just seems more natural to invite them at that time than it might be at another time throughout the year. So that's one of them. That is a great way for members to get involved in outreach, for it to be a church-wide effort, and just for the whole congregation to get on board in the sense that we're gonna all be out trying to invite people to attend this service. And it really helps them to latch on to something specific they can do to help play a role in outreach. I'm a huge believer in the fact that it helps. If we really do it well, it creates a great opportunity for church members to get involved in ministry. And part of what I mean by that is, big days are a great opportunity for us to evaluate the ministry that we're doing. It gives us a chance to evaluate, if you will, the systems that we have in place in our church. For example, if I'm thinking about the fact that we've got this big day coming and we're going to have more people on campus than we normally do, it helps me to think through how are we going to handle the guests that show up? What do we already have in place? What do we need to work on related to that? And what is the worship service going to look like during that time? We can talk about that here in just a minute as we get into some of those details. What do we have in place for children and for students? And what are our groups? What does our groups ministry look like? How do we connect people following the big day? What does our follow-up plan consist of? So they're just a great way for us to once or twice a year just broaden out to the big picture. We're getting ready for all these guests. It doesn't just need to be a day where we walk away and say, wow. A lot of people came, praise the Lord, that was wonderful. But instead, what do we need to do to latch on to some of this, to some of the prospects we might have identified, and how do we need to move forward in the hopes that God's going to continue to work in their lives and bring them back?
You know what you talked about, and now let me just make this clear: big days are not just for inner city, larger city, rural church plants, relaunches, existing churches. For the local expression of church, big days match or should match that landscape that the church is kind of laying out. Let's start. I want to come back to worship, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the non-successes I have had.
Okay.
At least one.
All right.
After a big day. Typically, church plants, Easter is a bad day to be, especially if you're 2 years old.
Okay.
It's just bad.
Yeah.
They're going to go to mom's house or grandmom's church or whatever. But to an existing church, or after that church has matured a little bit. So we mature, people come, we celebrate, and then the Sunday after that, we didn't make any phone calls before or after,
Right.
Nothing. Is there some level of, were we missing it? Or is the norm to just say, wow, we had a great day and it just fell apart? What are we missing with, making sure that the Sundays after that are good, not necessarily big, but good and healthy for the local church?
Yeah. Okay. So I do think, and I can think about this even as a pastor. I remember so many Easters where you walked away on Easter Sunday afternoon and it was glorious and triumphant and we had a great day.
Yeah.
And then the next Sunday, it seemed like attendance was worse than normal.
Exactly.
And so it's like everybody got church attendance out of their system. And stayed home the next Sunday, and that led me into the depths of despair.
There you go. That's right.
The Elijah coming off Mount Carmel
That's
and heading into the wilderness.
That's right.
And so in light of that, I do think it does us well to try to think through what are some ways we can be intentional to build on the potential momentum that can happen on Easter. Because I do think normally people just look at it as, we had a big crowd, that's kind of expected. And in some instances, we'll. I remember hearing a pastor one time. I wasn't in the room. I had it told to me that one time following an Easter Sunday service, a pastor who was actually serving as interim pastor. He was a senior adult man serving in that capacity, so he could probably get away with this. At the end of the Easter service, he said, "I want to wish several of you Merry Christmas because that's the next time I'll see you."
Yeah, that kind of.
I wouldn't advise that at the conclusion of my Easter service.
Watch your language during the. Yeah, it's more welcoming than chastising, I guess.
But I do think there is a way to build on that excitement of that big day in a way that carries on, and you may not immediately see fruit the next Sunday.
Okay.
But I think even if you do not have attendance that's reflected based on the excitement of the day, you can have church members that catch a glimpse of what God can do, and it can help build a sense of excitement and anticipation of the days ahead, and how that God can really bless and bring people and reward the work that His people are pouring in.
That's cool. You mentioned earlier worship, and you said you kind of come back to that. So do we? Should we show just a regular day or a regular Sunday? Especially with worship. Yeah. And we're specifically talking about Easter right now. I just kind of want to deal with that. And then we can kind of piggyback on others. Should we really do something different on Easter that we do in worship than we would normally do? You know what I'm saying? Is that part of the big day planning? I don't know if there's a such thing.
I appreciate that. And I do think, and even related to, even before you get to worship, I think it's interesting because there are so many elements leading up to the worship service. For example, the importance of prayer and getting the church family involved in praying and praying for lost people and praying for God to move and work. And so that's really important. And then how you're
ahead of time.
Ahead of time. So there's some stuff leading up to that day that's going to speak into what the worship service looks like. So you have praying and the intentionality of praying, and then you have inviting and the importance of how are we going to invite these people? Are we going to put resources in the hands of our members, or what's the invitation going to look like for that big day?
Yeah.
And then and before you get to the worship service, and this was hard for me to process and to conclude. Before a song is ever sung, or before the sermon, however wonderful it is preached,
Okay.
most guests have already decided whether or not they're going to come back to your church.
So you're telling me, but from the time they pull up in the parking lot, before the worship service even begins, songs, sermon, whatever, they've already made a decision?
Yeah, statistically, it's my understanding between the first 5 to 7 minutes, they have had some sort of interaction that has led them to an either favorable conclusion about the church or a negative conclusion. Now, that's not to say the Lord can't do a work in them and overcome some of those things, but I cannot emphasize strongly enough the importance of being ready for guests.
Yeah.
And one of these days we can talk about some experiences I've had as a guest.
Yeah.
And the fact that we oftentimes don't think about the message that we send. And so, matter of fact, I believe so strongly in this. When I'm able to be at my church, I serve as a greeter.
Do you really?
Because that I've had so many negative experiences that has been ingrained in me. We have to make certain that people are welcomed. I've heard it said, the gospel, when a person gets in the room and when they do hear the message and the gospel preached, it may be offensive to them. The fact that they're going to be told they're a sinner and they need to be saved from their sin.
Yeah.
We got to make sure we do everything we can to not offend them with our actions and attitudes leading up to that.
Yeah, there you go.
The gospel may offend, and the Lord's going to work in that. But we
don't let
the
greeters offend.
That's exactly right. Welcome them with open arms. So we could spend a lot of time focused on how a church can be ready for guests. But once you get to the worship service, I don't necessarily say that there have to be all these elements to the service that are not normal. You could have some sort of some great big choir or some sort of music that is unusual for the worship service. But I'm not necessarily saying that has to happen.
Gotcha.
When I speak of the worship service, I'm speaking in terms of really thinking through with intentionality, what are you going to say in the welcome time?
Yeah.
Because when I say, and I've done it myself in the past, when I say, would you please fill out that card so we can have a record of your visit? Well, guests don't care if you have a record of their visit.
That's right. Matter of fact, they don't want you to have a record.
That's right. And so just trying to think through with intentionality. What am I going to say in the welcome time if you pass the plates at your church post COVID, which my church does, where I'm a member?
Yeah.
Thinking through what you're going to say about the offering so that you communicate well, and is there a guest card that they could fill out and make that a contribution to the offering plate? If there's not an offering plate, what do they do with the guest card?
Yeah.
What are the instructions there? And then also, when it comes to the sermon, when we would have a big day, I remember helping a church I was serving as interim pastor at about 5 years ago. We had a big day, and leading up to it, I promised them I would not preach longer than 20 minutes. Now, the reason is I wanted them to feel like they could reach out to lost friends.
Yeah, there you go.
And I was going to preach for 20 minutes, and the majority of those 20 minutes was going to be to tell them how Jesus Christ could transform their life.
Yeah.
And so I wanted them to know that when they went to that effort to get a lost friend to sit beside them, they were going to get the gospel message as clearly presented as possible. And so now I'm not saying a pastor can preach however long he wants to and however long his church wants him to.
But you have to be authentic. And I think what you're saying is don't show them a church on the big day that's not you.
Yes.
Because when they come back, they'll go, where was that church that I came to on Easter?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so, and then think through the invitation. What is the invitation going to look like if you're in a culture where having people walk the aisle is very normal, and you have people come to the altar a lot to pray, and there's a lot of movement during the invitation? Then that's probably good for your church as a way to invite people. But if you extend the invitation at the end of the service and nobody ever moves during the invitation, then you're going to have to think through, how do you anticipate a first-time guest best indicating a response to the gospel or a response to more information, and thinking through what that needs to look like, so that they can indicate that they're open to whatever the Lord's doing.
Yeah, and you're starting to build a relationship, not only with that local church and that person, but also introducing them to a holy community. I call it a holy community, which is the local church and the gospel of Jesus Christ. Here's the thing that I and I know we can't get into all of the different pieces of all of this, but I do want to talk about this. And I think this was kind of in the questions that I asked. Do you have any ideas of big days that people have used in the past? Like, Easter, homecoming. You mentioned some earlier, and everything that we're talking about, the crux of what we're talking about, we're going to link in the show notes to the ABSC page that has all of this in there. absc.org/big day or big days.
Big day, singular.
Big day. Homecoming. I tried to incorporate homecoming in the city. It just didn't work. So it just didn't work. Easter is a good one. You said one earlier. Mother's Day. Is another good day.
Sunday before Christmas.
Christmas. Yeah.
And a challenge. Recently, I think it's been observed that for many, Christmas Eve service is huge. Now, the challenge with that one is it's more family and kind of almost a more intimate setting and very worshipful. So it can present some challenges in trying to mobilize a large number of your congregation, since Christmas Eve is very family oriented. But thinking through those kinds of days and figuring out how to maximize those.
Do you put those, and I know it sounds like a third grade question, but do you go ahead and put those on the calendar as you're planning? Like, when you plan, hey, we're going to camp, hey, we're doing whatever. Would you advise going ahead and putting that on the calendar, not just the day? Because you talked about a lot of stuff that you have to deal with before the actual day. Is that, or do you just organically go, hey, in 6 weeks, it's whatever, and we do it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I lean toward calendaring it. Matter of fact, I think it's really helpful for a church to look over the whole year and to be able to identify those specific instances when they're going to pour a lot into outreach in the community. And so I think, when you can circle those big days and go ahead and communicate to the church family, hey, these are going to be big days. Gospel's going to be shared. We're going to be ready for guests, and we're going to do effective follow-up, all those kind of things. I think being able to get that on the calendar goes a long way, because it's good to be able to, at the start of the year, say, and depending on what your church does for outreach, but if Easter is going to be a huge day, a church may have like on Saturday, they may do an Easter egg hunt, trying to reach out in the community. And they may say, try to mark these days off to help us with this. Or Vacation Bible School, mark those dates off. Or if they do a wild game banquet of some kind, mark this date off, so that at the beginning of the year, you can say to the church, if you'll give us these 4 days or whatever it might be, and we're going to really pour into this, so that it's a congregational effort at outreach. And then throughout the rest of the year, ideally, the church family is doing personal evangelism.
There you go.
Individually, and they're trying to impact their neighborhood. I think it's ideal to be able to get things on the calendar so that people can be aware. I need to be around that day. I need to help invest, and you can start doing some long range planning.
You talked about, and we're about to run out of time, but Marcus, this is good stuff. Again, all of the information that we're talking about is on the ABSC website, absc.org/big day, and we'll link in our show notes to this show. You alluded to the health of the local church, getting volunteers involved and doing all of that. Being a part of the church health team from the beginning, when you first got here, is evangelism and church growth, and then part of church health. And ultimately, that's what we're here for at the Arkansas Baptist State Convention, to come alongside churches and support them so that they can be healthy and healthy things grow. What other things do we not think about that, speak to the health of the local church as it relates to the big day? I don't know, getting volunteers involved, laying all of that out. But is there anything that we miss that we won't get, that we don't think about, that speaks to the health of the church when we do a big day? I'm chopping up that question. It's killing you, but I know.
No, I think that's good. And so some things that come to my mind, a couple of things. One is again, I can't emphasize enough creating an environment where you ask church members to really view that day as ministry. It's not just attend, and we're gonna be thankful there's a big crowd. But I can recall a big day that we've done in the past where we mobilized. I think we ended up mobilizing about 50 people to do ministry on that. I mean, we're talking. We had everybody in the room had a name tag on. It didn't matter if you'd been a church member for 60 years or it was the first time you ever set foot in there. And I would really encourage that on a big day because you know of all these people you're supposed to know their name as other church members. Well, that's a great excuse to be able to really learn their name with those name tags. But that mobilizes people for ministry. We had a photo booth. So have your family take a photo, and then what you say was, we will email it to you. So I need your email address to communicate with you as a first-time guest.
There you go. So you're getting the information.
You're getting the information. But you have church members that are excited about this kind of ministry, and they've never been able to do this kind of thing. Yeah. And so it mobilizes them. And then the other one is, and this is where the hard work begins, following up. And I'm a believer in something called a follow-up night, where you either meet that Sunday night or the Monday night or Tuesday night right after the big day. Yeah. And this is a part of a mobilizing of your church family to really immediately follow up on people, where you're going to have people that place phone calls, people that write letters or emails or texts, and even in some instances people that might even make personal visits. Okay. And so there's information on that website that you mentioned about all these different elements. But what we're after is God-given momentum. Yeah. That is what we really long for is, Lord, we're going to pray, we're going to reach out, we're going to share the gospel, we're going to follow up, and then we're going to be praying God blesses and gives a sense of celebration and anticipation of what he's doing, and we're going to anticipate he's going to do more in the days ahead.
Dude, this is good stuff. And I know we only have a few minutes and go through that. Marcus, this is major. And I think if other churches, regardless of the size or the location or the culture your church is in, African American, Anglo, Hispanic, whatever, Hmong churches that are in Northwest Arkansas, it really does not matter. Everybody has their own big days. Everybody has big days. If the culture has big days, they took it from us because we started with the first big days anyway, to begin with. Super Bowl is a big day, but which I realize that, so let me, a fail story. So we try to do Jersey Sunday on Super Bowl Sunday. Okay. And it's amazing how people will show up late for church on a regular Sunday, but will say they're prepping all weekend for a couple of hours on something that happens on Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. It blows my mind. I'm not dogging it. I'm just saying it just amazes me what happens like that. Listen, again, more of the information, absc.org/big day. Marcus Brown, thank you so much. I had to work through a lot of things to kind of work through your schedule to make it work, and I'm excited. Listen, Marcus prays in a way that you have to just pause and listen. And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your personal ministry. I appreciate, just what you've done for me personally when you were on the team. And now I don't like you anymore because you're not our team leader, but that's okay. Listen, if you have questions, listen, Prism now has a Facebook page, and it's called Prism. And I don't know the rest of it, but we'll get you the rest of that. And we'll link that on the show notes, also a Facebook page and an Instagram. Marcus Brown from the Arkansas Baptist State Convention. Thank you so much for making Prism your home for podcast resources and information. Prism, a guiding light to guide churches.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Prism. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, or even if you didn't, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you'll never miss one episode